Okie dokie. This is Two Tails, and I'm your host, Gavin Miles. This podcast breaks down hunting and fly fishing from a boots on the ground and a flies on the water perspective. My goal is simple. I want to keep it entertaining, practical, and help you elevate your skills to make every outing count. Well, guys, welcome back to yet another episode. I can't believe we're this far into the podcast, right? And I'm excited for this week's episode. It's been a pensive couple of days here. I've been pondering, trying to figure out what content might help you guys as the viewers, the listeners, to really hone your skills and to elevate your knowledge to help you apply different skill sets on the water to help you net more fish, right? So as I have been pondering, I've been asking myself a lot of questions. And one of these questions really stuck with me, and that is today's topic. Today's topic is, drumroll please, why tie? Why should I tie? Why should you tie? Why should we tie? As fly anglers, I think this is a vital skill. Not necessarily an essential skill, but I think it's vital in the success or vital in shortening the learning curve. So I've got a plethora of things, fly tying materials out here in front of me, and I want to touch upon a couple of them through some stories, right? If you're familiar with kind of the setup or how the show goes, I like to share stories to put things into perspective and to give you guys some of my own experience and then hit some takeaways. So today I have two stories for you and a bunch of different takeaways. So bear with me and I'll try to get to the point and be concise. But you know me, I like to talk myself in circles almost as much as I like Coke Zero, right? If you can see it right here, Coke Zero, my number one. So today's first story is actually about the first fly that I ever tied. So I'm stoked to share this story with you guys. There is a little creek, stream close by meaning like an hour and a half away. And this little river has a very special place in my heart. It's one of the rivers that I first really jumped into the deep end with, tried to dissect the different runs, the different water patterns, the pools, you name it. And this is where I've learned, I don't want to say everything, but a lot of different skills and tactics, and kind of built my foundational knowledge off of this river. And it holds a special place in my heart because of that. It helped shape me into the fly angler that I am today, and I'm really grateful for it. So anyways, there's a little bit of context behind why I love this story and this little stream. But to recount you a couple of different stories here on this one stream, I had been out a handful of times, right? Maybe 6-7 times, got them. And in the past, I had used some of my brother's flies, some of my friends' flies, some shop flies, flies that are tied by professionals, like from Fly Fish Food, for example. But I had never fished with my own fly patterns, flies that I had tied. I've never done that. I had never tied my own flies. I had never fished with my own flies. And so I loved fishing with these other flies because it gave me a wide variety of different patterns, different techniques, different proportions, different approaches. And I was enthralled, really. And I caught fish on all of these different patterns, okay? There wasn't a single fly that was worse than the other. There wasn't a single fly that was better than the other. All of these different fishing trips all seem to be about average, right? We'd go out and in a day we'd catch, 5 to 10 fish depending. And I loved it. It was great. Don't get me wrong. It was great fly fishing, but there was never the electric days where you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't help but catch fish right now. Where it's just cast fish, where your net is getting tired. It's never been that electric up to this point, right? So I was curious and I was wondering, well, should I get into fly tying? Should I do my own? Should I not? What's the cost benefit? And well, here we are. If you can't tell from the video podcast, I've got a lot of different materials, and this is just a teeny tiny fraction of the fly tying materials that I have. But yeah, I do love to tie my own flies now. And the first fly that I ever tied for myself was a spin-off of a pheasant tail, okay? And this nymph pattern goes back to this stream of certain characteristics that I would catch on to doing my little entomology checks, right? So entomology, kind of like the study of insects, of bugs, especially aquatic insects. So when I say my entomology check back on this river, I would be flipping stones. I would be pulling off or pulling branches off of the river bottom to look on the branches, the limbs, the leaves, to see what bugs were in the water column and in that river system. So after these entomology checks, I was realizing little characteristics that you would never, ever, ever pick up on if you were just fishing without doing this, right? So yeah, you could go and you could use generalized flies, and that's what we had used in the past. And they were great, right? Then we caught fish on them on these different trips. But I took pictures of two patterns that I had used in the past. I took what I liked the best, and then I compared it to a picture that I had taken of some of these little bugs. And I tried to combine I tried to make all of these parties meet in the middle, like a little Venn diagram, and the overlapping sections of these different fly patterns, that's the fly I wanted to tie. So I couldn't find that through the shops or with my buddy's flies or with my brother's flies. So I figured I figured in my own head that I had to create that pattern. So a lot of talk, a lot of build up to this pretty simplistic pattern. And it's just a pheasant tail, but it has a flashback wing case built with some tinsel. Tinsel's right there on the top of my pyramid. And this flashback is created through that tinsel. It really adds a little bit of contrast, a little bit of light to a darker body because the body is built with this pheasant tail. And the pheasant tail is it's really pretty. It's natural. It's brown, it's tan, it's got a little bit of black in there, right? You can darken it up if you want. But that tinsel specifically helps with the contrast. So I'm not done yet with these little unique characteristics to this fly pattern, if you will. I was realizing that these bugs in this creek had different contrasting necks right before their little head segment on their bodies. So I wanted to mimic that as well, right? And I did that by using different thread colors. So I would use a darker brown for the body, and then I would switch colors to create a cream color. If you can see right there on the bottom, for you guys, bottom right of the pyramid, there's my cream colored thread. And I would use that thread to create another contrast, right? If you remember from an episode or two back, I talked about 3 things that fish will key on to, in that being size, shape, and color. I talked a little bit about this subcategory of color, how contrast plays a big role in that, and fish love contrast, you guys. They can see contrast like no other. So there I am with my first fly ever tied on my own vise with my own hands, and I winced because it was not the prettiest fly that I've ever used. And I've come a long way ever since that first fly to the flies I'm now using and now throwing at these fish. But needless to say, it has been the best fly that I've ever used on that specific stream. Why? Well, I've already told you why. Because it's been super specified and the details have been delivered to the fish in this one pattern. It's a cohesive mesh of different fly patterns with the realistic bugs in the water, and these fish go crazy for it, okay? It's turned these average fly fishing trips into lightning, exciting, into enthralling, into where it's just fish after fish, cast after cast, and I haven't gone back. I've always used this fly, no matter what, without fail. I've used this fly every time I've been back to that stream, and not once have I been skunked with that fly as a part of my rig. So it's still unbeaten as I have tied other patterns and kind of matured, created new patterns, tied other patterns, filled my fly box with a plethora of different bugs, nymphs, dry flies, streamers, you name it. There's only one that I would argue that is close to it, but in my opinion, it's still unbeaten. But the second pattern, for those of you who know, is Frenchies. I love a Frenchie pattern. It's a very, you could almost call them siblings. This cream-collared flashback pheasant tail and the Frenchie pattern. But for those of you who fish with me, especially that Frenchie is a confidence fly of mine. And this one, when we're fishing there, I will always have it as part of my rig. So I love it. I'm there for the success part of tying your own flies, excuse me. But let's jump into some story takeaways, right? Enough jibber jabber about the first story. My first takeaway from this stream, and why should I tie, is it mandates concentration. There's a lot of voices, a lot of noise in the world, just period. Outside of the scope of fly fishing, there's just a lot of noise. We live in a boisterous world, and our attention is pulled every which way, right? It's crazy. It's hectic. And that's why I love tying my own flies. It gets me to take a step back. It helps me relax. It helps me disconnect from all of that noise that's going on in not only my head, but like I said, the world. So it mandates that concentration, not only here at the desk on my fly tying vise, but also on the river. As I mentioned, doing entomology checks. Who here, by raise of hands, not that I can see you, but by raise of hands, has ever done an entomology check? Me. Okay, I've done it. I don't know about you guys. If you haven't, I would strongly encourage you to. That helps in matching the hatch and really getting dialed onto that river. But it mandates concentration. Before I thought of tying my own flies, I never thought of doing an entomology check. So I just wasn't quite as concentrated on the river as I should have been before tying my own flies. So not only does it help you stay concentrated here at home or on the river, it helps you stay concentrated onto fish eating patterns, fish eating habits, where they like to hold, where they like to stage in the river itself. So, and quite honestly, I don't know that you can beat that. I think that one benefit alone, from all these other takeaways I'm going to mention, I think that one benefit alone kind of justifies getting into tying flies. But here's another one, if you're not convinced yet. It also helps you stay curious. So my first two takeaways, concentration and curiosity. It helps you stay curious, and this might be the biggest takeaway from today, so listen closely, okay? Curiosity, there's nothing more effective than it when it comes to fly fishing, especially when you pair that with your own experimenting, right? So, for example, if I have, like I said, with this river, I wonder why these patterns that I've used have only led to average days. I'm not complaining. I still caught fish. It was wonderful. I just was wondering how I can elevate my fishing game and take it to the next level. So my curiosity was, what could I change in my fly pattern? Well, then, me coupling that with my own experimenting, I was flipping rocks. I was checking out the bugs. I was looking at the different fly patterns that I was using. And then I took that experimenting, those observations collected through my own experience, and I put them to work on my vise. Started experimenting, and voila, I came up with this little specified pheasant tail. I don't want to say it's my own fly, but it's, a unique, specialized, detailed pheasant tail specifically meant for this one river. So I would argue that there's nothing more effective than curiosity, especially when you start experimenting on those curiosities, on those questions that you're asking yourself when you're out. So remember that. Please remember that. We're going to touch on it in the future here in just a second as well, just to really drive that point home. Story number 2. I mentioned I have 2 stories. Story number 2 is about strawberry leeches. Ew, gross. Am I right? That's disgusting. We don't want leeches in our strawberries. That's not, it's more of a metaphor here, okay? Metaphorically speaking. But those of you who have ever been in Utah, lived here, visited here, driven through here, I'm sure you've heard of this gigantic reservoir, not the Great Salt Lake, but Strawberry Reservoir, okay? This place is near and dear to my heart as well, like this first little stream that I mentioned, but Strawberry is where I did a lot of growing up. I grew up there camping, hunting, fishing, scouting, swimming, boating, cliff jumping, a wide variety of different things. And it's really morphed into a fly fishing mecca for me. It's one of my favorite places to go. I'm not going to tell you my secret spots, right? They're not secret anyways. But I have loved this place for fishing for, my own reasons. And especially in 2 certain times of the year, right? During the winter, as winter arrives, the ice is starting to form, and in the spring it starts to melt. These 2 times are wonderful for fly fishing here, and just fishing in general, right? So these fish are looking for meals as they go into the winter, and they're looking for meals as that ice layer melts off, right? It traps a lot of food, and these fish are hungry come springtime. So us as fly anglers, we can take advantage of that, and I have in the past, and this is kind of the story, right? The story takes place in this one little finger of the lake, and right at ice off. So in the springtime, there's still big icebergs floating out in the main channel of the lake, and some of it's still frozen solid. But these little slivers of, these little arms, these little branches of the main channel branch off, and the edges thaw off. Well, the fish are smart. They're predatory fish, right? They're cutthroat, specifically after the species I'm going for. And they are very opportunistic. They will look to the edge of the ice for any food that has, been solidified, has been iced in those layers, and is now melting and dropping into the water for them. They will cruise and munch, and they will just engorge themselves in all of the food that comes off of these ice layers. So there I am on the shore, wade fishing. I've hiked in, and I'm wade fishing, and I've only got about an hour or so of fishing to do because I'm in between work projects. I work remotely, and I work in different places and different projects, and often all of those in one day. So I'm in between projects here. I've got a little bit of time to fish. So I want to capitalize in being, in passing the lake. So I start fishing. I've got this little fly that I've tied as well. That's why I'm including it in this podcast episode. And there's the first fish, right? Within the first 3 or so minutes, I've caught my first fish, and I was like, wow, this is a hot start. Normally I'm there kind of twiddling my thumbs, looking around, and not really getting into them right off the bat until I really get honed into the ungulation of the lake, if you will. The topography changes, the shelves, where the wind is blowing. And anyways, there I am, 3 minutes in, first fish. Wonderful. Wow, this is awesome. I'm happy with even just this one fish, right? Well, then I get it in and I do my thing. I unhook it. I take a couple pictures. I love just documenting them with pictures, and I can put that up here on the video podcast for those of you watching. And so I release it and it goes back in, and I'm casting, a minute or two later, a second fish. I'm like, whoa, okay, wow, this is awesome. So catch the second fish. Well, within an hour, I had caught a total of 15 fish. So I just was ecstatic at this point. I was so happy. I was in disbelief. I've never had a day that hot for that long and that consistently. And it was on a fly pattern that I had tied. And I was just, I just, speechless like I am right now. I just could not believe it. I was flabbergasted, if you will. So the fly pattern, I'll tell you a little bit about my fly pattern. It's almost a convergence, a combination of a woolly bugger and a leech. And yeah, those are almost synonymous, right? But I tied it with some marabou. Here's my marabou right here, the big fluff ball. And I used some hackle, some grizzly hackle, to create a little bit of contrast, right? The white and black on the black. And then I used some, I don't think I have it out, but I used some dubbing, the Midnight Fire dubbing. I've got my boxes of dubbing here, but the Midnight Fire dubbing specifically to add a little bit of color, right? And I'm trying to mimic not only leeches, but some little bait fish that swim around in the lake that are called chub, right? These little chub minnows will swim around, specifically in the springtime, and these cutthroat just love them, right? They're easy prey, they're high calorie meals, and the cutthroat will attack them. So that's why I throw in a little bit of that grizzly hackle to light in my fly, and it mimics these chub minnows and the leeches that swim around in the lake. And man, oh man, I have always had luck with this one fly. I won't leave my house without having this one pattern in my box when I'm fishing on that lake. So there you have it. It's my own little spin-off. It's been productive. It's been effective. And there's no going back. Every time I do, or every time I go out, I'm using this fly as part of my setup. I'll run it in tandem, meaning with another fly as a point fly in front of it, or having it as the tail off fly in the back, or vice versa, or just a single fly. I will fish it different ways, retrieving it actively as just a still fly out there on the water under an indicator. And no matter what I do, I will catch fish with this fly, right? There's an anomaly every once in a while where it's a slow day, but yet I'm still catching fish with this fly. So there you have it, you guys. Both of my stories, hopefully those two stories alone are reason to get into fly tying. If not, there's some takeaways, concentration and curiosity from the first. And here are my takeaways from story 2. I mentioned the species of fish I was after being cutthroat, right? Bonneville cutthroat trout in Strawberry Lake. And that's my takeaway right there. Tying your own flies helps you get to know your fish better. And kind of make a full circle moment here. Getting to know your fish will fulfill your wish. Now that is a cute little mantra, and it's a mantra that I have used for a long time in fly fishing. My wish in catching more fish, elevating my game, taking it to another level, and really trying to immerse myself in nature, in the outdoors every time I'm out. And so getting to know the fish helps me fulfill that wish. So like I said, with the context of that story, Bonneville cutthroat trout, time of year, and what they're eating. Without tying my own flies, I'm not quite as honed in on the time of year or their available diet, right? So that time of year specifically is when that hatch of chub minnows comes out or comes off, and they just fill the lake, right? So I'm concentrated there. My curiosity comes into play of how can I mimic these little bait fish that are swimming around. Well, not only that bait fish, but how can I mimic the leeches that swim in that lake, so that I'm kind of targeting two main diet points in, or two main meals in these cutthroats diet. So getting to understand what fish you're after, whether that's for brown trout in a river, or like me, cutthroat in a lake, or brook trout in a stream, or, all of these different fish species have different personalities. So trying to be educational here, cutthroat are really opportunistic. They can be aggressive, known as an aggressive trout species, and they will often be the predatory fish in a water system. They're also territorial, right? So they can get aggressive in defending their little area of the lake. And so next time you're out, remember those couple of things when you're going for cutthroat trout. Just get to know your fish to make that wish come true, okay? So let's get into some main talking points. Enough with the stories, enough with the takeaways. Here's some talking points for you. I mentioned the concentration. I want to dive into that a little bit deeper. It helps you get dialed, right? Tide flying helps you get dialed into, all of these different facets of fly fishing. Fly fishing is more than just having a fly rod and a fly reel and these little, hair patterns or dubbing patterns or feather patterns hooked or wrapped around a hook and thrown out to the fish. It's way more than that, you guys. We can do better, okay? So it gets you dialed in. I mentioned the size, the shape, and the color that fish will look for in this podcast episode and in an episode in the past. But let's jump into kind of the details of the size, the shape, and the color. Primarily with proportion, with tapering, and with contrast. Okay, so size for me comes down to not only the size of the hook, whether it's a size 2 hook or a size 20 hook, 2 being larger, 20 being smaller, but it comes down to the proportions that you can create on your own fly pattern, on your own hook at home when you're fly tying. Proportion is key, you guys. All of these little bugs have specific dimensions. For example, they will have a larger thorax, a long tail, they'll have a small head, they'll have medium-sized legs, all of these little teeny tiny details are specifications that the fish that live in that water system have been honed into for a long time, their whole life, right? It's what they eat for food. It's just like you when you're eating a Wendy's hamburger compared to an In-N-Out hamburger. And I'll let you guys decide which of those two hamburgers is better. But you can tell the difference, right? And you have your preference between those two. That's what we're trying to match when we're tying our own flies. For me, I love In-N-Out, and Wendy's has gone downhill a little bit. So I'm going to eat the In-N-Out burger every time over the Wendy's burger. So for me as a fly tyer, I'm going to be trying to get in the mind of those little, brown trout in the stream of, okay, who wants the In-N-Out burger that I'm throwing out? Well, to me, the proportion that I'm tying on my fly hook mimics those bugs better than a generalized fly from a fly shop. I don't mean to hate on fly shops. I'm just trying to say you can be a little bit more detailed, a little bit more specific in your own tastes when fly fishing than you can with some of these fly shop flies. So there it is, size to proportion. Proportion is everything. If you have too big of a wing case, fish might turn an eye to that and reject it. If you've got too long of tail fibers coming out of the back of it, the fish might not love that. If you've got too long of legs coming out of the wing case or too short of legs coming out of that wing case, the fish can catch on and they're not going to eat it. So let's get into kind of the shape here. Shape is directly influenced with the tapering that is created on these hooks. So tapering is going from small or skinny diameter to a thicker, wider diameter, okay? And we love tapering because insects in the real world, all of their bodies are tapered, right? They're not just one big Coke can swimming around in the water like this, right? There's no tapering here on a Coke can. It's all just one size to the top, right? Bottom to the top, one size. That's not how flies are. They've got little tails, they've got intricacies of their body, and we need to try to mimic that tapering in our fly patterns. We can do that through fly tying. There you go. Another reason to tie your own flies. Color. Color is a big thing. Color and contrast, okay? We're looking for the contrast of the flies. Like I said in the first story, I created contrast with using the tinsel on the dark body, and I used the cream collar to create contrast. Wow, cream collar to create contrast. What a mouthful. Between the gold bead that I was using and the dark body that I was tying with the pheasant tail fibers, and the purplish, pinkish, bluish, greenish wing case that the tinsel creates. So there's a lot of contrast in that fly. And the fish, the way the fish see is they see contrast. So that it can be why, for example, it can be hard to fish when there's runoff, because the river gets really dark and murky, and it's hard to create contrast with your flies to those fish. There's a lot of different reasons why it's also difficult, because the flows increase, the fish are looking for shelter, but the fish still have to eat, and you can catch the fish during, that chocolate milk looking water or the runoff, because fish just can't not eat. Kind of a double negative, but they have to eat, right? And it just makes it more difficult because the water color is way different and the contrast isn't there. So looking for contrast is a great thing as a fly angler. That's why you'll have like the saying of, on a bright day, you fish bright flies, bright streamers, bright nymphs, because that sunlight can penetrate through the water and it can make that whatever fly you're fishing with sparkle. It can create the contrast with the materials on that. For example, tinsel does really well in high light environments because it catches the light, it makes it shimmer in the water, and fish love that. That's what they key into before anything else, is the contrast. So you can hone your color skills through the way you contrast your flies. Kind of a sub story, if you will, here on that same lake on Strawberry Reservoir. I will fish with dungeon patterns, white dungeon patterns as well. And I will always carry a Sharpie with me when I do this, so that if I don't like how bright it is, I can darken it. I can create my own contrast. It goes beyond just here at the desk on my vise. I can still adapt, adjust, and create different variations of flies out on the water with this little Sharpie, right? So there's another little pro tip. If you want to use that, let me know how it goes. Here's another main talking point. This is one of my favorites. It's that experience gives you insight, and insight gets you results. Okay, I heard this in a hunting setting, but I think it's totally applicable, 100% applicable to fly fishing as well. Experience gives you insight, and insight gets you results. So if you can create experiences out on the water, and I know life is busy. I too am very busy as a college kid, and I work a lot of hours. So getting out can be tricky, but every outing is crucial to your learning. And that right there is the key, you learning. So experience to insight means that you're learning things. You're experimenting, you're understanding, you're finding new ways of overcoming obstacles that are thrown at you on the river. And that insight will get you more results. So for example, as a beginner, I could barely cast it, right? I had a difficulty in tight, narrow areas of trying to get my flies to specific parts or spots on the river to where I thought the fish were holding. I would get snagged on my back cast. I would cast into the trees, the bushes. I'd catch the bank more than I would catch the fish. So through experience, through insight, I realized, okay, maybe my back cast is only a 5-foot section, so I'm going to roll cast. There you go. That single insight has enhanced my skills as a fly angler. So I love that saying. And don't forget that, right? Experience gives you insight, and insight gets you results. Okay, last but not least, sorry, a little long-winded today, but we talked about staying curious. And you guys all know that old saying of curiosity killed the cat. Well, I want to amend that today, and I want to morph that into saying, no, curiosity did not kill the cat, but curiosity did catch the fish. So it kind of plays back into the experience and insight, right? Curiosity, asking questions, doubting different things. I think doubts can be healthy given certain boundaries, but doubting, having curiosities, asking those questions, pondering, wondering, all these different things lead to changes, lead to adaptations. And those little changes can help you net more fish, catch more fish, enjoy your experience a little bit more each outing. And remember, you guys, fly fishing, any skill is like a big learning curve, okay? I think you guys are in the right spot in shortening that learning curve if you're listening to this podcast, because you have the right mindset. You have the curiosity mindset. Well, what can Gavin tell me that can help me? And that's the whole goal of this podcast, is to help you guys to become better, to hone your craft, to hone your skill, to elevate your game. And I want to build a community in that. And I think that's wonderful. And we can do that by staying curious. So you guys, that right there is my leaving lesson, and I'll catch you next week. But please stay curious.